It's Spoilerin time, ladies and gentlemen. On today's slightly abbreviated version of Spoilerin time, we will talk about episode 1 of season 4 of Justified. As we move into that, episode 3 of season 1 of, or as I've written it here, Westworld. Maybe we'll even add a D, call it Westworld. But I'm Tom Merritt. This is Brian Brushwood, and Spoilerin time is not Cordkillers. Cordkillers is the show where we help you figure out how to be able to watch what you want, when you want, where you want, and on whatever device you want, so that you don't have to think about it anymore, and you can just watch these amazing shows, Brian.
Cordkillers be planting trees, Spoilerin time be eating fruits. How about that?
How? No, that's exactly right. We are about to eat the fruits of our labors. But first, real quick, if you're wondering about the Arizona Fall League movie draft, the winter movie draft is going to happen right after we record this episode of Spoilerin time.
Yeah, we're going to keep it short. We're going to get right to the point. We're going to talk about Justified. We're going to talk about Westworld. Which one do you want to go with first?
We have 2 emails about Westworld, so it makes sense to me to start with Westworld.
All right, so the first email we got was criticizing, not criticizing, supplementing our coverage last week. Tim
ripping
writes
us apart about our coverage last week.
Tim says, I think your gentleman missed an important tidbit.
We didn't miss anything.
Anthony Hopkins' character meets a little boy in the desert. He says that little boy is a robot most likely created by Hopkins of himself as a little boy. They're both wearing similar outfits, and they both have the same memory of when they were a child, which I don't know that was quite spelled out,
I wouldn't call that missed. Maybe I'm a little sensitive to that word, but that's a really, really good observation. I totally can see that.
Yeah,
now,
I like that take on it for sure.
Yeah.
And then separately, and let's read this beforehand, and maybe this will color the experience. But Jeffrey writes in saying, I came across an article, and he gives us a Nerdist link. We'll put it in the show notes, and found this theory very interesting. The fact that the story of William, our reluctant guest, is actually flashback scenes of the Man in Black. You wouldn't be able to tell the past from the present against the unchanging backdrop of Westworld. William mentions he has someone real back home. Perhaps he loses this person, and that begins his transformation from white hat to black hat. And this idea, I love this idea that the Man in Black story, we never see him interact with any echoes of what's going on in our main story. And then also, it's pointed out in this Nerdist article that William only interacts with Dolores. It's the only host we see him interact with. And maybe all of this happened 50 years ago, and now this bitter, broken old bastard is who William has become.
Okay, so here's the thing to work through on this. Dolores is the key to this theory holding up after this most recent episode. Because if he were, then Dolores would have to be on the same storyline and not have had the awakening yet. Is there a scene where Dolores clearly is the modern, post-awakening Dolores?
Oh, that's a good point, because you're right. I think all of his interactions with Dolores were pre-awakening even.
Because the only one I know for sure is that she drops the can and it rolls over to him.
Yeah.
And he plays that part. But the implication there is that he's doing that because the other guy got retired because the Man in Black, took him.
Okay. All right. Well,
let's
put a pin in that, right?
Yeah.
But the mere fact that we can be thinking in these terms, I had never even considered the possibility that we were seeing scenes from different timelines.
By the way, bordering on spoiler though, but that's one of the tricks This Is Us plays with you.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Right on. Good. That's not too much of a spoiler. It's like, you see something in one context and you reveal the bigger context.
And Westworld hasn't done that to us yet. Doesn't mean they won't.
Yep. Agreed.
And it would explain, here's the other side that I want to say before we actually get into break down the main episode. We see William early in the episode decide to go on the bounty hunt, right?
Yep.
To go round up the posse. We never see him again the rest of the episode.
No, we do. We see him at the end. Because Dolores shows up.
His buddy is at Dolores's house, right?
Yeah, no. But then also Dolores shows up, and his brother-in-law to be is like, oh, finally something's happening. Remember they were hanging out at the campfire. Yeah.
That's right. So that's all we see is at the very end.
That does kind of break the timeline issue then. So okay, maybe not a great theory, but something.
It was a great theory. Just unfortunately,
time jumping thing. Pretty good.
Yeah. It's something to be on the lookout for. In other words, also, I had a hard time wrapping my head around the backstory of Anthony Hopkins' partner. And how, I mean, I get what they were trying to say is that, what's his name? Albert is at risk of falling to the same fate as Anthony Hopkins' partner. But since it was all exposition and I was sitting in an airport watching it, I was like, okay, so he had a partner who got too attached to the robots and then he died in Westworld before the park opened.
It did feel very forced, but it was also welcome in that
Arnold,
it opened
not
up,
Albert, sorry.
It opened up more possibilities and of the backstory to me. So, yes, it was clumsily executed. Also, kind of clumsy was up until this episode, and maybe this is them just revealing a kind of deeper, darker layer to Anthony Hopkins' character, but like I got a kindly watchmaker vibe. I got Geppetto out of the first 2 episodes of him. And then all of a sudden, just this weird gratuitous cutting people up like they're not real. You know, don't think they're real. Stop thinking it. That was pretty weird.
Yeah, it was a little surprising when he just cut the face because it did tend to go against his more caring attitude. And it was supposed to fit into the like the later revelation of like Arnold got too attached to these guys. I think what we're supposed to get is those early fatherly emotions are things that he actually is struggling against. He doesn't want to turn into Arnold. And Bernard, not Albert, Bernard is the guy that he is projecting onto, saying, you're going to end up like my partner if you're not careful. But also, he's also worried that he's going to end up like his partner. And so maybe that could be the motivation of that scene is he's angry about seeing this possibly happening again. And so he lashes out. See, you could just cut them, even though he's been on the verge of treating them more human in the past.
Yeah. But while we're on the topic of weird, I don't know, obviously forced into story elements in the dialogue, like what 3 times Bernard stops. It was like, and you didn't tell anyone about our conversations we've been having, right, Dolores? Because it's very important. That's why I'm saying it 2 or 3 times.
I don't want anyone in this warehouse to know
that you and I are talking.
I could forgive that. It is a little weird though, but I could totally.
Just a little bit ham-handed considering how clever everything else has been, right?
Yeah.
And understand, but before you guys write, we love the show. We think it's a great show.
Oh yeah.
These
absolutely.
are just some of the weird, like it's so perfect that all we can see are these tiny cracks on the edges.
The story of Arnold, I think, was a little disappointing, and maybe we'll get the actual flashback in a future episode, but I really wanted to just be told. I wanted to be shown that story, and maybe that's because we're gonna reveal that certain things are flashbacks that weren't. I don't know, but like, why not give me a flashback? Although they haven't avowedly done a flashback yet, but I'd rather see Arnold and a young Anthony Hopkins play out that story, because we did see a young Anthony Hopkins. They gave us a little montage of that and did the visual effect to show him when he was young. But I would like to see like what did Arnold do? What happened to him? Don't just tell me, because it doesn't stick in my head.
And that's just it. Is right now with us being starry-eyed viewers who are like, well, what on earth could be wrong with falling in love with the robots and imbuing them with the same value you would give another human life? But it's like, if you could show us and not tell us, like that, it's dangerously close to telling us and not showing us.
And we all know that the danger is that they'll remember all of the crap that they've been put through, and we don't know what effect that will have on, and but certainly won't make them happy. We see that with the guy who lures them by going off vector and then jumps out from the rocks and attacks. And then we also see what I think is an entirely a robot posse, except for two people, run into a monster that's like wrapped in bandages or something. Like I didn't quite. I'm not a little unsure where we're going with that story.
Hold on, maybe I'm thinking of a different spot. What scene are you talking about?
I'm talking about where the guy who's leading the manhunt into the mountains, and he's got the woman who's human,
Right.
and he's got a kind of a stuttering guy who's human who leaves. It's like I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And then there's a kind of a monster guy who comes out after them.
Oh, this is where they run across like the team of bandits. It's Williams men. Is that?
Yeah, but
or
there's
Wyatt's?
just one guy who's all like monstery.
I don't think
It
I really.
seemed, I
saw that guy.
thought they were like Native Americans.
Yeah,
in
I thought they-
garb or something.
Okay,
Yeah.
again, in an airport on a very reflective screen, I couldn't really tell. Was he supposed to be just a native then?
Oh,
I think so. I think that was just a guy in a disguise.
Okay.
Yeah, well, the vibe I got is that they set up this Wyatt backstory, and again, this is the great
Wyatt,
thing.
that's right. He's going after Wyatt because that's the new backstory. Thank
Right,
you.
right. This is the great thing about this framework of this show is you can inject it, and you can have, "Hi, I'm a surrogate for the writers. We're now doing this story," and then in it goes. I got they set up the whole like cult-like vibe about Wyatt, that he had big ideas about, sovereignty of man and so on. I just figured that was his cult showing up. And if there's one particularly monstrous figure, it's probably Wyatt, who is, James Marsden's
When your
nemesis.
laptop's really dusty and the airport lights are bright, it looks much more imposing.
I swear I thought you were about to do a limerick. That was amazing.
Anything else here? Because mostly I feel like Dolores' story proceeded as expected, but not very far.
Yeah, can I just take a moment to acknowledge how great that actress is? The
She's so good.
subtlety of when they say, resume character improvisation only or whatever, and those subtle difference as you register, not in a like over the top like now I'm acting
I
like
am
it's
now robot.
yeah, exactly. But instead, like they went for a very nuanced angle, and the fact that everything's understated in the differences of character is extraordinary. I think that's really, really wonderful, and it shows that they give the audience a lot of credit.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap up Westworld, any thoughts about next week?
I don't know. Oh, but one thing in that Nerdist piece is they point out that the logo when William comes in is the logo for Westworld is different from every other time we've seen it. Every other time we've seen it, it's the futuristic W logo that we see on the HBO promo.
Well,
This one,
I call that current. It just looks like a modern logo to me.
Sure,
But yeah,
sure.
gotcha.
But the other one could look a little rougher around the edges, a little
All right.
first generation. So I don't want to entirely give up on this two timeline.
yeah,
thing.
there might be something there.
Yeah.
Because that could be explained as like, well, that's just an older part of the park and they never updated it.
And even if they're not the same guy, plus also maybe everything happens in the present, and it's only, Man in Black is crazy future other story. I don't know.
Yeah. All right, we'll keep noodling on it though. Good thoughts, Tim. Good thoughts. Let's move on to Justified episode 1, season 4, which kind of leaves, it's funny. Part of it's because we're binging on it, but part of it I think is because I'm so used to these Netflix stories that really do carry on from season 1 to season 2. I felt at loose ends with Raylan like, well, all of that's in the past now, and I just hang out at the bar, and then, oh, Boyd is going to talk to a new person who he needs money from about a new threat that will set up, but you won't have met until the very end of the episode. I felt very unmoored from the environment and world that they had spent so much time building in the first 3 seasons.
That's really interesting to hear, because I guess I always assume from one season to the next, the moment the big whatever story is over, unless it's a cliffhanger, there's sort of this, I just assume it's 2 months later. It's after summer vacation, right? Everything's settled down. I loved this episode. I thought the idea of setting up, all of a sudden his dad, what's his dad's name? Arlo? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
The idea that Arlo, of course, he has amazing tales. They've hinted at that for a long time, but now we're seeing tangible evidence of one of them. And we're seeing Arlo in this curious place of being physically incarcerated, but more powerful a character than we've seen him, yet. And that is fascinating to me. Arlo went from my least interesting character to my most, and meanwhile seeing Boyd just mired in the tedium of running a profitable business. It's like watching Small Town the series or Small Business the series, you know. And it's like I think it's great, and I think this whole idea of a snake handling, you know, a cult like religious institution coming in. The setup. This is the best first episode of any season of any Justified I've seen so far.
I think you're so right about Arlo, and I hadn't really thought about it. He has to take his meds now.
Yeah.
Right. Like he could try not to. There's ways to get around it for sure. It's not like,
but like
being
to what benefit?
But he's probably just given up. Like, fine, I'll take my meds, and of course that works. That makes him more solid, and he's been on the inside before. He knows how to deal with all of that. So it makes sense that he would be able to, you know, assign people to go do things. I am very intrigued by the bag with the driver's license. Like, that is such a non-obvious MacGuffin. And I can't wait to find out a little more about Mr. Truth.
Yeah, well, which, by the way, I love the fact that they call out the strange writing by saying, like, Truth. That's a weird name for a last name. And then it's like, yeah, because I was thinking that same thing.
Yeah.
I know I'm very, very excited about where things appear to be going in this next.
All right, folks. Well, we will continue apace with Westworld and Justified. And do you want to update anybody on Luke Cage? We talked about it in Cordkillers as well.
Dude, I mean, I got distracted. I ended up watching Siege of Jodotsville.
I don't know. You watched it.
I watched I watched The Irish Alamo, as it was originally called.
There you
Except
go.
It was called The Irish Alamo, but don't worry, not a single soldier dies. But
It's
ironically,
called Alamo.
Oh, Alamo.
Yeah.
Alamo. Oh.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll spoil you next time. Keep an eye out for the winter movie draft in your feeds. We'll talk to you soon.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.